He looked in the mirror and hated what he saw. A man in his late 20s with empty eyes and a tired heart. 10 years gone just like that, chasing nothing but time killers. Endless scrolling, fake laughs, late nights and mornings full of regret. His name was Jake, and this is his story. Jake was not always this way. Back in high school he had dreams, big ones. He wanted to be a teacher to inspire kids to speak fluent English. He had talent, passion, and people believed in him. But distractions came fast and they came strong. First it was video games, then social media, then parties every weekend. One day turned into 1 month, 1 year, and then 5. He told himself he would start tomorrow, but tomorrow never came. He would open a book, but the phone would buzz and win every time. He learned memes, but not meaning. He followed trends, but not purpose. At age 28 he realized he could barely speak in English confidently. All those years he told himself English is hard and I'm not good at it. But deep inside he knew the truth. He never really tried. He wanted fluency, but didn't practice. He wanted change but stayed still. His life was like a paused movie stuck in the middle. One evening something changed. He saw a video of a guy who spoke English with power and style. That man said 5 words that hit Jake like lightning. Don't waste your life like me. Jake felt those words deep inside, like a punch to the soul. He turned off his phone and sat in silence. He opened his notebook and wrote the date and one sentence: I will not waste another year. He searched how to speak English fluently and started with daily phrases. He listened, repeated, copied, and made mistakes, but kept going. For the first time in years he felt alive. Not because life got easier, but because he chose to fight. To learn, to improve, to speak with courage. He didn't chase perfection, he chased progress. That night was the first night of the rest of his life. Jake started waking up early for the first time in years. He would sit on the balcony with a cup of coffee and listen to English podcasts. He didn't understand every word, but he never paused. He just kept going. He downloaded an app and learned 5 new words daily. He made flashcards and practiced with himself out loud like a crazy person. At first people laughed and teased him. They said, "Come on man, you're too old for this, just chill." But Jake smiled and said, "Not anymore." He was not chasing fame, he was chasing his future. He was not doing it for likes, he was doing it for life. One day he walked to the mirror again, but this time his eyes were different. There was fire and focus, there was a goal. He looked at himself and said, "You are learning and you are not quitting." That small sentence became his daily reminder. He started speaking to strangers in English at coffee shops. Sometimes his grammar broke and sometimes he forgot words. But he smiled and said, "I'm learning and that is enough." Each conversation built confidence, each sentence built belief, and the fear slowly turned into pride. Jake started reading children's books in English. He watched cartoons with subtitles. He would repeat simple sentences like "I can do it" and "I will speak well." He believed in small steps and big dreams. The old Jake was gone and a new version was being built every day. Jake had started to feel proud of himself again. He was still far from perfect, but at least now he was moving. He would write short stories in English even if they made no sense. He joined a small Facebook group where people practiced English together. He posted voice messages and got feedback from strangers who supported him. But not every day was bright and beautiful. Some days his mind would go dark and his old habits tried to return. He would hear that voice in his head saying, "You are not smart enough. You started too late, everyone is ahead, and you are left behind." Those voices came like storms, but Jake had built an umbrella. He would remind himself why he started. He would look at his notebook where he had written, "I will not waste another year and I will speak English no matter what." He would read old chats where people appreciated his effort. He had turned his phone into a tool, not a trap. Jake knew he had missed many years. He had wasted time on things that didn't matter. But now he understood one golden rule: your past does not define your tomorrow, and your mistakes are not your identity. So he started helping others in the group. He replied to beginners and said, "I was just like you. He shared what worked for him: short videos, repetition, shadowing method. He told people to speak even if they stutter, to try even if they fail, because confidence grows only when you water it with action. His English was getting stronger slowly. He could now speak for 2 minutes non-stop about his day. He would walk around the block and describe what he saw in English: a red car parked near the bakery, man walking his dog. Each sentence gave him power, each word gave him purpose. Jake wasn't just learning English anymore. He was rebuilding his character. He was becoming someone who shows up even when it's hard. Someone who doesn't make excuses, finds reasons. Someone who stopped wasting his life and started living it. Jake sat in the park one morning with his notebook. He looked around and started describing everything in English. He said, "The sky is bright, the grass is green, the wind feels nice." These were simple lines, but they made him feel strong, because now he was using the language, not just studying it. A little boy walked by and said hello. Jake smiled and replied, "Good morning, how are you?" The boy's mother looked surprised and said, "Your English is very good." Jake laughed and said, "I'm still learning, but thank you." That one moment stayed in his heart all day. It wasn't a big award or a trophy, but it was proof that his hard work was real. Every new word, every small sentence was building him from inside. And for the first time in years, he liked who he was becoming, not because of fluency, but because of discipline. He wrote in his journal that night, "I had a full conversation today, without fear. I didn't translate in my head, I just spoke. Maybe I'm not perfect, but I'm not the same Jake I used to be." And that made him smile before he went to sleep. The mirror never lies. Jake stood in front of the mirror again, but this time he wasn't afraid to look. He saw tired eyes, but not empty ones. He saw scars from the past, but also the strength to move on. He whispered, "I am learning and I am proud of it." He remembered how many times he avoided the mirror before, because it showed him the truth he didn't want to face. Now it showed a man who was trying again, not perfect but progressing, not fast but focused. He spoke one full paragraph in English while looking at himself. He said, "Today I am not afraid to speak. I will speak with mistakes and keep improving." He had never imagined he could say that, but now it felt real because it was coming from effort. The mirror became his practice partner and his reminder. No one will do it for you. Jake once waited for someone to help him. He thought maybe one day a friend would teach him. Maybe a teacher would sit with him after class. Maybe a magical app would make him fluent in a week. But now he knew no one was coming. People can guide you, but they won't do the work for you. They can cheer for you, but they won't carry your weight. Learning English is not a group project, it's a personal fight. And Jake had finally accepted this truth. That changed everything for him. He stopped waiting for the right moment. He created the moment himself. He practiced while walking, cooking, waiting for the bus. He used every second like it mattered, because now it really did. The first public speech. Jake had to give a short introduction in his class, just 30 seconds to talk about himself in English. He felt his heartbeat racing, his palms sweating. But he told himself, "You have prepared for this moment, and fear is not stronger than your purpose." He stood up and started. "My name is Jake and I am learning English because I want to teach someday. I believe that we can always restart our lives no matter the age. I used to waste time, but now I use it to grow. Thank you for listening." There was a short silence, then the room clapped. Jake smiled with tears almost in his eyes. He had done it not perfectly but honestly, and that is what made it beautiful. One small speech became a huge victory. Lessons from a stranger. One day Jake met an old man at the library. The man was reading a grammar book and looked serious. Jake asked, "Are you learning English too?" The man smiled and said, "Yes, I'm 70 and I just started." Jake couldn't believe it. He sat with the man and they spoke for an hour. The man said, I wasted many years thinking I was too old. But then I realized wasting time on that thought was the biggest waste. Jake felt like he was looking at his future self, but this time with no regret. That meeting changed Jake deeply. He learned that it's never too late. The only time too late exists is when you stop trying. He thanked the man and promised to never stop, because every day is a new chance if you are brave enough. From regret to respect. Jake used to live in regret. He would think about lost years and lost chances. He would say, I wish I had started earlier. But now he had changed that sentence. He said, I'm glad I started when I did. He saw people who had time but no will. He saw people with phones full of distraction and hearts full of doubt. And he saw himself not better than them but different. Because he had chosen to respect time, not waste it. And time was now respecting him back. He got a message from a student he helped online. The message said, your story inspired me to try again. Jake sat in silence and smiled. He had become what he once needed. And that is the highest kind of respect when you feel like giving up. One rainy evening, Jake sat by the window feeling low again. The sky was dark and so was his mood. He had tried for weeks but still made mistakes. Sometimes his tongue twisted, sometimes his mind went blank. And that voice in his head whispered, maybe this is not for you. He closed his eyes and remembered his first step. The fear, the doubt, the silence, and the decision to change. He remembered how he couldn't even speak a full sentence, and now he was having full conversations with strangers. He reminded himself that progress is not loud, it's quiet and slow. Jake opened his notebook and flipped through old pages. He saw broken grammar, strange spellings, and simple words. But next to them he saw effort, courage, and growth. He realized that every page was proof that he didn't give up, that no matter how weak he felt, he kept going. He stood up, walked to the mirror, and started talking to himself. He said, you're not done, you're just tired. You're not weak, you're just growing. Every master was once a beginner. Every strong speaker was once silent and scared. That night he recorded his voice and played it back. He heard himself speak about life, about learning, about dreams. And he smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He was no longer afraid of how he sounded, because now he spoke from the heart, not for approval. Jake wrote in his journal again. Today I felt like quitting, but I didn't. And that is more important than being fluent. I choose to rise, I choose to speak, I choose to live. I'm not wasting my life, I'm building it every single day. Today he taught his first lesson. Jake was invited to a local learning center. They needed someone to talk to beginners about English speaking. At first he said no because he felt unqualified. But the organizer said, we don't need perfect English, we need a real story. And Jake realized this was his moment. He prepared all night with small notes and simple examples. He didn't memorize, he just practiced being clear and calm. He walked into the room the next day and saw 10 young students. They looked scared just like he once was. And in that moment he knew exactly what to say. He said, I was you just a few months ago. I couldn't speak. I was afraid of mistakes, I thought I wasn't smart enough. But here's the truth, you only fail when you stop trying. And every single day is a new page in your story. One girl in the back wiped her tears and smiled. Jake felt something powerful in that room. He wasn't just learning English anymore, he was using it to lift others. That first lesson wasn't about grammar or accent. It was about hope, belief, and taking the first step. And Jake knew this was just the beginning. When friends disappear, Jake noticed something strange after his growth started. Some old friends stopped talking to him. They didn't reply to his messages or calls anymore. They said things like, you've changed, or you act different now. And at first that hurt him deeply. He sat alone one night and asked himself, why does it feel so heavy? He realized that when you grow, you outgrow people. Some friends want the old version of you. The one who wasted time, joked around, stayed stuck. But Jake had no interest in going back to that person. He started spending time alone in libraries and parks. He listened to motivational podcasts, read simple English books, He walked with his thoughts and wrote his goals in a diary. And slowly he stopped missing the ones who left, because he was too busy becoming the one he always needed. Jake learned a big lesson during that time. Not everyone will clap for you when you rise. Some will disappear, some will mock you. But if you stay true to your purpose, the right people will find you. And that was enough for him to keep going. Speaking to a crowd. One weekend, Jake attended a public speaking event. He didn't plan to speak, but the host asked if anyone wanted to share their journey. His heart raced, but his feet moved forward. He stood in front of 50 people with shaking hands and began telling his story in simple English. He said, "I was afraid of the alphabet, afraid of judgment, afraid of myself. I wasted years, but I woke up one day and decided no more. I learned from podcasts, from books, from my own mistakes. And today I'm here speaking in front of you. Not perfectly, but proudly." The room stayed silent, listening to every word. He saw nods, he saw tears, he saw respect. When he finished, people stood up and clapped. One man walked up and said, "You just gave me courage to start." And Jake realized that his voice now had power. He went home that night with a full heart. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he was changing lives one word at a time. And that meant more than anything money could buy, because his pain had now become someone else's push. When confidence comes quietly. Jake was walking home after buying groceries. He stopped at a coffee shop and ordered in English, without even thinking. He said it naturally, clearly, and with a smile. The barista said, "Wow, your English is great." Jake paused and realized something powerful. He didn't plan this moment. He didn't rehearse or prepare or check grammar. He just spoke because it had become part of him. He sat down with his coffee and thought about the old days, when even saying hello made his hands shake. Confidence had come like sunlight after a long storm. Not loud, not sudden, but soft and strong. He remembered every voice that said he couldn't do it, and every moment he wanted to quit but didn't. And that coffee tasted better than anything he had in years. He whispered to himself, "This is what growth feels like. Not when people clap, but when you realize you don't need them to. Not when the world notices, but when you notice yourself." And that quiet pride in his chest was louder than any applause. Jake knew this was only the beginning. Helping a stranger begin. Jake saw a young boy sitting alone in the park with a notebook. The boy was staring at English words with confusion. Jake walked over and asked, "Are you learning English?" The boy said, "Yes, but I don't think I can ever speak it." Jake smiled and sat beside him. He said, "I used to feel the same way. I thought English was for smart people or rich people. But then I realized English is for anyone who chooses not to give up. It's not about having talent, it's about having heart." And the boy looked up like he was hearing truth for the first time. Jake helped him practice 5 simple sentences. He said, "Say I can learn English, I can speak confidently." The boy repeated each line slowly and with a shy smile. Jake said, "You already started, and that's the hardest part." The boy nodded and said thank you with a glow in his eyes. As Jake walked away, he felt something warm inside. He knew what it felt like to be lost and unsure, and now he was becoming the guide he once needed. One small moment changed that boy's day, and gave Jake even more purpose to continue. The night he cried with pride. Jake was alone in his room listening to a voice recording from last month. It was him practicing a speech full of mistakes and nervous pauses. Now he played his new recording and the difference shocked him. He was clear, smooth, confident, and calm. He couldn't believe both voices were his. He sat on his bed and felt his eyes fill with tears. Not because he was sad, but because he finally saw his own journey. He had come so far from that scared, silent boy, and no one gave him this gift, he earned it. With hours of struggle, hundreds of replays, and endless effort. I know now that nothing is impossible when you believe and act. I'm not chasing English anymore, I'm chasing my best self. That night he didn't need a crowd or applause He didn't post anything online. He just lay on his bed, smiled with tears, and whispered, "Thank you, Jake, for not quitting on me." And then he fell asleep like a warrior resting after a long battle. When the past comes back, Jake was walking through his old neighborhood one evening. He saw the same bus stop where he used to waste hours scrolling his phone. He saw the fast food shop where he would sit for hours doing nothing. And suddenly all those memories hit him like a wave. Memories of wasted time, lost years, and empty excuses. He sat down on the same bench where he once thought about giving up. He remembered how he used to say maybe it's too late, how he would look at fluent speakers and feel small inside. He would tell himself you're not one of them, but now everything had changed. He opened his phone not to scroll but to write. He wrote a short story in English about the boy he used to be. A boy who was scared of books, who ran from speaking, who thought learning was for others and not for him. But then he chose to fight back and write a new story. As he typed each line, he felt something rise inside him. Not regret but redemption. The past no longer hurt, it now gave him power. Because he had walked through it and come out stronger. And now he was not ashamed of it. He was thankful for it. He whispered thank you to his old self. Thank you for not staying stuck. Thank you for making the choice to grow. Thank you for walking forward when everything said stay down. And then he stood up taller than ever before. The dream that woke him up. One night Jake had a strange dream. He was standing in front of a huge stage with thousands watching. But when he opened his mouth, no words came out. He tried to speak, but only silence came. People in the crowd looked away and started leaving. He woke up sweating, heart pounding, and breathing fast. It felt so real, so painful, so personal. He sat in the dark and tried to understand it. And then it hit him that dream was a fear he never said out loud. The fear of losing everything he worked so hard to build. He got up, washed his face, and looked into the mirror. And he said, "I will never let fear steal my voice. I have worked too hard to be silent again. If I fall, I will rise. If I forget, I will relearn. But I will never go back to being voiceless." That night he stayed up recording himself, reading new words, repeating hard phrases, listening, correcting. He challenged his tongue to move faster, his brain to stay sharper. He pushed himself not out of fear but out of purpose, because that dream was not a nightmare, it was a warning. Jake wrote one sentence in his journal before sleeping again. Losing your voice is worse than making mistakes. And he promised himself that as long as he had breath, he would speak, he would teach, he would lift others, and he would never waste another dream. The job interview that changed everything. Jake received an email from a company he applied to. They wanted a video interview in English the next morning. He stared at the screen, his heart pounding. This was not just about a job, this was a test of everything he had built. And for a moment fear tried to speak louder than his belief. He went into preparation mode, but not the old panicked version. He made a list of answers, repeated them out loud. He stood in front of his mirror and practiced eye contact, body language, tone. He didn't aim for perfection, he aimed for presence, because he knew confidence was the real language he needed to speak. The next morning he logged in, the call began. He introduced himself, clearly told his story slowly, and answered each question with honesty. At one point he said, "I used to be afraid to speak in English, but now I use English to break my fear." The interviewer smiled, then nodded slowly as Jake kept speaking. When the call ended, Jake didn't know if he got the job, but deep down he knew he had already won. He had faced his fear and spoke like a man who earned every word. He wrote in his journal, "I didn't just pass an interview, I passed a wall, and now there's no going back." A letter to his old self. Jake decided to write something he had avoided for a long time. A letter to the boy he once was. The boy who wasted time, who ran from books, who hated his reflection. He sat in silence and began, "Dear younger me." Then the tears slowly began to rise. He wrote, "I know you were lost, scared, lazy, and unsure. I know you thought you were not smart, not capable, not chosen. But let me tell you something, you were always enough. You just didn't believe it yet. But I'm proud of you for waking up. You made hard choices when no one believed in you. You walked alone when friends disappeared. You studied when it was easier to scroll. You cried and still kept going. And because of that I am here writing this letter in English. Jake folded the paper and kept it in his notebook. Not to read it often but to remind himself that pain has a place but it doesn't have to stay in charge. You can write over it with truth, growth, and new stories. And every day, it's a new page you get to choose. The day his mother cried. Jake's mother didn't speak much English. She had always seen him struggle and worrying. She remembered the days when he would sit in his room angry at himself, when he would avoid speaking even at home. But now something had changed. One evening he showed her a video of his public speech. She watched him speak fluently in English with confidence. She didn't understand every word, but she understood everything. Her eyes filled with tears and she held his hand tightly. She said, "I don't know what you said, but I know it was powerful." Jake never thought he would stand in a debate room, a place where quick thinking, sharp words, and confident delivery mattered. He sat in the back row just to observe, but a student dropped out last minute. The teacher asked, "Can someone volunteer?" and before he could stop himself, Jake stood up. His heart was racing, but his voice was steady. The topic was, should we face failure or avoid it? Jake stood tall and said, "Failure is not a wall, it's a window. It shows us what we missed and what we must fix." He used words like persistence, resilience, self-belief. And with every sentence he spoke, his fear melted. That night he searched 10 new vocabulary words from that debate. He wrote them down with examples and practice until they became his own. Words like consistent, vulnerable, articulate, confident. And he whispered to himself, "I am not just learning English, I am owning it." The letter from a stranger. One morning Jake received an email from a stranger. The subject said, "Your story saved me." He opened it slowly and read each word with wide eyes. The writer said, "I saw your speech video, and I was about to give up on learning. I felt like I was drowning in self-doubt, and your story gave me oxygen." The letter was written in broken English, but the meaning was clear. "You gave me hope, you made me feel seen, you made me believe again." Jake read it twice, then a third time, then he sat back in silence. A tear rolled down, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from the weight of realization. His journey was no longer private, it was now a bridge for others. His pain, his struggle, his imperfect progress. It all became a roadmap for people stuck in their own silence. He replied to that stranger with kindness and gratitude. And he promised to keep sharing no matter how messy the path looked. That day he wrote 5 new inspirational words in his journal. Empathy, courage, clarity, expression, and freedom. Because that letter reminded him that words can heal. Even when they are simple, even when they are broken. Speaking on stage with professionals. Jake was invited to a youth event full of professionals. Speakers with suits, accents, experience, and big titles. He sat in the back wearing a plain shirt and simple shoes. He felt small for a second, but then he remembered. When it was his turn, he walked up with slow steps and a clear voice. He began with, "I am not the most fluent or the most polished, but I am the most honest about what it takes to speak English without fear." The crowd leaned in closer word by word. Because he was not performing, he was connecting. He used real vocabulary from his story. He said, "I lacked discipline, I battled self-doubt. But I discovered something powerful: consistency creates change." He told them to repeat this sentence daily. "I am learning, I am growing, I am enough." After his speech, a young executive said, "You reminded me why I started and how far I've come." Jake walked off stage with no trophy, no title. But he carried the loudest thing of all. Respect that was earned, not given. Jake was working on his laptop when his phone rang. It was from an international learning organization. They said, "We saw your story and we want you to speak at our virtual summit." He froze, his hands shaking, his voice silent. Was this real, or just another dream knocking on his door? He said yes with a voice full of disbelief. They asked him to share how English changed his life, and how anyone from anywhere could rise above fear. Jake prepared for 3 days, choosing his best stories, best lessons, and most of all, his most real truths. When the day came, he sat in front of the camera, thousands watching from different countries and cultures. He began with, "I'm not an English expert, I'm just a believer in second chances." He shared his pain, his progress, and his passion, and every word landed like fire and light. After the session, he received hundreds of messages, from Brazil to India, from Africa to small towns in America. People said, "You gave us courage, you gave us the mirror we needed." Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had just spoken to the world with the voice he once buried, the farewell to the old Jake. One rainy evening, Jake walked to the same park bench where it all began. He sat with a notebook and wrote a letter, not to someone else, but to himself. He titled it, "Goodbye, Old Jake." The boy who wasted time, who doubted his mind, who feared his own voice. He wrote, "Thank you for surviving, for not giving up completely. And now I speak not because I want to impress, but because I want to impact." He folded the paper and placed it under the bench, like a symbol, like a goodbye gift to his former self. He walked away slowly, not with sadness, but with strength. He didn't just learn English, he learned how to live. And that was the real graduation. As he reached the end of the street, the rain stopped. A soft breeze touched his face like a quiet blessing. He smiled and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Jake. Not for speaking perfectly, but for speaking at all." And in that moment, he was finally free. Jake now teaches spoken English online. He begins every session with the same line: "If you can speak your pain, you can speak anything." Because learning English is not about accent or grammar. It's about courage, consistency, and self-respect. He remembers the boy who once stared at the wall thinking he was useless. And now he looks in the mirror and sees a man who chose to rise. He is not fluent in every word, but he is fluent in belief, fluent in effort, fluent in showing up when it's hard. And that makes all the difference. To anyone listening, Jake says this: your voice is not weak, it's just waiting. Your story is not over, it's just unwritten. And your time is not gone, it starts the day you decide to take it back. Don't waste your life waiting, speak and start now. Because fluency is not perfection. It is when your voice finally matches your fight. And when your words carry your heart. And when you finally say, "I am not who I was and I'm never going back."